Hi, I'm Sarah Bramwell, the editor of fundoperator.com and insuranceinvestor.com. I'm here with Sally Bridgeland, Chair and Non-Executive Director at the Local Pensions Partnership Investments. Sally is speaking at our Fund Operator Summit Europe later this year, and ahead of that, we wanted to catch up with her to get a bit of a flavour of what she's going to be talking about. Hi, Sally. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Sarah.
So you're going to be talking about impact and income and investor perspectives. So my first question to you is, how can fund operators make sure that their ESG strategies are in line with institutional investor needs, particularly when those needs could vary quite significantly from sort of client to client?
Absolutely. I mean, it's never been more important to remember that you've got two ears and one mouth and to use them in that proportion, because the interesting thing about impact investing and ESG is people do have very different ideas of what it's all about. So if you just are focusing your philosophy on one particular angle, that might make you the perfect fund for particular investors, but it might mean that you're not the dream date for others. So actually making sure that you're clear in articulating it is going to be really important, and also having the evidence to back it up.
Great. And, what is the sort of role of data here? And can people get too bogged down in data? And what are some of the challenges and risks that fund operators perhaps need to be aware of when it comes to thinking about ESG data?
Yeah, I think the reality is that there's an awful lot of data out there already, but there's an awful lot of data that isn't there. And so it's quite often being used as an excuse or a reason why this is too difficult, why we can't prove everything. And much as I love maths, I'm a mathematician by training. I suppose my big encouragement would be, don't make a meal out of the maths here. It's really important to be very clear why you're using the data. Largely, the kind of data that we've got at the moment is backwards looking. So it's going to be great at helping you show how progress might have been made against certain metrics, but it's not really measuring the world that we're investing in the future. Its predictive power isn't going to be as strong because we just weren't investing like that before. These things weren't important to us. So being very selective about the metrics that actually suit the product, the funds, and really the stories that you need to tell about those to make them compelling investments, whether it's to retail investors or institutional investors, that's going to be absolutely key. Now, that might mean that you have to have a range of data available for different customers, and they will have huge expectations of how you can use technology at the flip of a switch to produce reports on any particular impact that they have in mind. But the reality is likely to be it's going to be more important to have clean, reliable data than trying to overscope and over-engineer the data at this stage.
That makes perfect sense and leads me nicely to my next question. So you kind of talked about communication. How can fund operators and asset managers perhaps think about their communication strategies and making sure that the stories that they're telling around ESG are compelling, but also critically, accurate and not greenwashing, etc.?
Yeah, and I think it's the danger, the greenwashing. The clue is kind of in the name. It's kind of a sort of very weak wash of, yes, we're doing everything and being all things to all people. What I find more compelling as an investor is a manager who's very clear about what they're doing, but also what they're not doing. So are you avoiding the bad stuff and raising the bar and having particular targets in mind to make sure that you're either excluding or engaging with companies that mean that they're going to get better? Or are you deliberately trying to invest in things that are going to help us make that just transition to a sustainable world, or move to fairly to a different place in the future? And the more specific that you can be about examples and stories, the more compelling that will be. And backing it up with evidence and specific evidence. So certainly what I've said to people when they're producing reports for clients is, give me your 3 best examples. What are the 3 best stories? And also, where do you draw the line? when would you disinvest? Or when would you stop engaging with a company? And give me some statistics on that. Prove it, show me. So that every story that you've got, every strong story really does have some facts behind it.
Lovely. And then last one, you talked about impact and kind of making a difference. As we move into a world where more and more investors and funds are focused on illiquid investing, how does that change ESG strategies and how we're thinking about kind of getting these green investments right?
Yeah, I think there are two things. One is making sure you get in at the right price. So being able to be confident that you're not overpaying for what might be a fashionable investment when everybody is trying to invest in a similar pathway, but also anticipating the other factors that might come into these kinds of investments. So if you're investing in something like solar panels that actually helps out with your net zero targets demonstrably, making sure that it isn't having a negative impact on the social working, for example, of those who are involved in producing solar panels. So those kinds of examples are really important because you can't necessarily with illiquid investments just sell them. So anticipating those risks, anticipating the things that are currently externalities to companies, but if the path along greater impact investing proceeds, and we've got no reason to believe it won't, that those things might become more and more important. And there's also something that's a bit different from the way that models and the way that we think about investments on liquid investments work, which is you think about the different factors that matter to the values of companies. Actually, when you're on a liquid investment, the factors that matter on their income is actually more important. So some of the things around inflation, around supply chains, those are more important with illiquid investments when investors are actually thinking about what are those cash flows going to look like, and making sure that they are diversified against each other and you haven't got particular concentrations of risks. That's the kind of things that people who are investing in illiquid assets might be more interested in.
Lovely, thank you. Well, obviously this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour, Sally, but I can't wait to hear more from you and also all of our other speakers at our Fund Operations Summit later in the year on this and many, many other operations issues.
Fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to it.